So welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our lecture series called Daily News in Shorts. In this lecture series, we cover a particular day's current affairs in a short span of time. Now, needless to say this, just watching this lecture would be job half done, because along with that, you need to revise this lecture as well. Because if you're going to just watch this lecture, well, these current affairs would quickly skip your memory. And that's not something that we want. We want to retain these current affairs at least till our exams. For that, revision is extremely important. Now, you can revise these current affairs from the notes provided by us, and these notes are shared on our Telegram channel. The link to our Telegram channel is provided in the comment section just below this video. Okay then, enough of the introduction. Let's straight away jump into the lecture. But first, let's take a look at the list of topics that we shall cover today. So let's begin. So daily current affairs, 16th of December, it's Tuesday today, and here is the topics list. So, Union Cabinet has approved MGNREGA Bill. Basically, it's a bill. The name of the bill is different, but it's going to replace MGNREGA Act, the Guaranteed Employment Scheme in Rural Areas. So we'll talk about this. Then another bill which is going to be tabled in the winter session, and that is Higher Education Regulatory Overhaul. So a new bill has been proposed which will replace the existing higher education system in India. So we'll talk about this bill as well. Then, well, Prime Minister is on a 3-day West Asia tour, and the first country that he decided to visit was Jordan. So we will focus on India-Jordan relations. Okay, what dimensions are there in this bilateral relationship? And topic number 4 is related to India's narrowing trade deficit, which is good news after such a long time. Okay, this would ease the pressure on rupee. So these are the 4 topics that we shall zero in our attention on. So topic number 1 is related to polity portion, policy and governance also. Topic number 2 is again related to polity or policy and governance portion of our UPSC syllabus. Then topic number 3 is clear-cut international relations portion of our UPSC syllabus, and topic number 4 is economics. Okay, so these are the 4 topics. Let's start discussing them one by one, starting with topic number 1, and that is that is the MGNREGA Bill. Okay, so well, in 2015, Prime Minister Modi made a speech, and in that speech, it was pretty much clear that he's not happy with the current MGNREGA Act. Okay, now MGNREGA Act gives 100 days of guaranteed employment to all rural people. So if you can't find a job, well, government will give you a job for 100 days, guaranteed, at minimum wages. That was the idea behind MGNREGA Act. Now, Prime Minister Modi in 2015 showed his displeasure. Then he was criticized a lot that he's anti-poor, suit boot ki sarkar, and all these criticisms were leveled against him. So the government couldn't do anything about it. But now the government is replacing the bill with another bill that will provide guaranteed employment, but major changes have been made in this. Okay. Now, as far as MGNREGA Bill is concerned, well, any person who cannot get employment in rural areas can register with government and will get 100 days of guaranteed employment. The government would register you and then would use your labor for repairing canals, constructing something, for skilled, semi-skilled or unskilled labor. Okay, so constructing canals, repairing canals in rural areas, all of this would be done, right? So this is the idea behind MGNREGA Act. Okay, and many economists have praised this law. As far as developmental economists are concerned, they have really praised this law. But now it is being replaced. Now what changes are being made in this law? Let's talk about this. Okay, what changes are being made? And only if you have knowledge of those changes, then only you will understand the criticism that is being leveled against this bill. Okay, so let's quickly discuss this. So MGNREGA Bill. So what's the name of the new bill? Vikasit Bharat Guarantee for Rozgar and Ajivika Mission, Grameen Bill. Many people are criticizing that, well, their argument is that you have removed Mahatma Gandhi's name. You are erasing Mahatma Gandhi's legacy. Well, nonetheless, that is a criticism, but there are other critical points as well. But we'll get to critical points. First, let's talk about this bill. So the bill proposes to repeal or reframe MGNREGA and introduce the Vikasit Bharat Guarantee for Rozgar and Ajivika Mission, Grameen. Okay, it seeks to align rural employment with the Vikasit Bharat vision. So rural employment scheme will align with Vikasit Bharat vision. And instead of guaranteeing 100 days, well, this new law guarantees 125 days of employment. So this is one point that is better. Okay. 120 days of wage employment per rural household per year, up from 100 days. Okay. In MGNREGA, it was one person will be employed for 100 days guaranteed employment per household. Okay. Now it is 125. Now some key provisions. Well, structural shift from purely demand-driven work to planned infrastructure-oriented model. So what will happen now? Earlier, it was a demand-driven scheme. Basically, the person has to raise the demand that I am unable to find work, and then government will generate work for them. And if there is no work, government has nothing for them to do, then government will pay them unemployment allowance. But in this scheme, what happens is that it's not demand-driven anymore. The government will plan infrastructure projects ahead. The government will plan the work ahead beforehand. And then as soon as people register, government would allocate them work. Okay, so it follows a planned approach rather than demand-driven approach. Works are grouped into 4 verticals. So anyone who registers for this new law that they are not, register for what purpose? That they are unable to find work. They would be given work in these 4 areas. Water security, so any repair of canal, well. Core rural infrastructure like roads and connectivity, repair of roads. Livelihood related infrastructure like storage markets and climate resilience. Okay, afforestation and all that. So these are the 4 areas where work will be given. Public works will be aggregated into Viksit Bharat National Rural Infrastructure Stack. So all the work will be planned beforehand and then arranged into a stack. Once the work is over, it will be removed from stack and new people would come and they would be allocated different work. So the projects will be planned beforehand. This is an improvement. This is good. Plus the project completion would be digitally tracked. Biometrics would be used. So you have to showcase your attendance. Okay. This would remove corruption. GPS mobile monitoring would be there. Now, all these projects that would be planned ahead would be planned as per Gram Panchayat plans. So every Gram Panchayat prepares their plans. These plans would be collected and then put onto the stack. You're understanding? So it is more of a planned approach rather than demand-driven approach. Make sense? Now, some other changes. Shift from open-ended demand-based central funding to normative budgeting. Basically, normative budgeting is outcome budgeting. Okay, which means if the outcome of the scheme is not good, government can reduce the budget for this. Okay, so people are criticizing this for this. Plus, in earlier MGNREGA, well, states were only contributing very little money. Most of the funding was done by center. Now, under this new law, states' share in funding has increased. That is why states are objecting to this. In fact, many people are calling it anti-federalism because now states have to contribute more money. And people are saying, what about those states which are already very poor, don't have that much money? You are putting a burden on them as well. This is the criticism. But states have to contribute more. Allows up to 60-day pause in work during peak sowing or harvesting season. So when farming season is on in rural areas, well, there will be a 60-day pause in MGNREGA or this rural guarantee scheme. Why? Because during farming season, most of the workers are employed in MGNREGA. So there is shortage of labor in farms and farmers have complained about this. So government has addressed this issue. Retains a statutory employment guarantee with mandatory unemployment allowance. This is retained from the previous act. If work is not provided within a stipulated time and promises digital wage payments. Now everyone has a bank account. So to reduce corruption, money would be credited directly to your bank account. Okay. Create central state Gramin Rozgar Guarantee Councils and steering committees to oversee implementation. So everything would be overseen or supervised by Central Gramin Rozgar Guarantee Council and State Gramin Rozgar Guarantee Council. States are alleging that the Central Gramin Rozgar Guarantee Councils are given more powers. So this amounts to centralization, which is again criticized and called anti-federal. Okay. Now first let's talk about the benefits of this scheme and then we'll move on to criticisms. Okay. So what are the benefits? Well, first of all, 100 to 125 days. So this will boost rural incomes. Okay. Unemployment allowances are retained and pauses up to 60 days. This was a demand by farmers that please do not provide work during sowing season or harvest season. So government has listened to this demand. It shifts to outcome-oriented planning via Viksit Gram Panchayat plans, like we discussed earlier, integrated with. Now these plans would be integrated with existing infrastructure schemes of the government. like PM Gati Shakti and all that. Okay. States gain decentralized execution with national oversight, fostering cooperative federalism. Now, central government is saying that we are allowing states to participate more, thereby allowing cooperative federalism. But many states don't want to participate more because that means that they would have to contribute more money. What about those states whose budgets are already stretched? So those states are objecting. So let's talk about criticism now, okay? So yeah, dilutes MGNREGA's demand-driven rights. Earlier the scheme was demand-driven, now it is more planned. People are objecting to this. Shifting 40% funding burden to states. Earlier it was very low. States are objecting to this. Critics point to greater centralization and potential weakening of Gram Sabha. Earlier the projects were overseen by Gram Sabha. Gram Sabha is basically a collection of all the voters in the village. But now it will be overseen by these central councils and state councils. And this is one of the biggest criticisms leveled by Congress party, of course, erasing the legacy of Mahatma Gandhi because you have removed his name from the scheme. Okay, so that's all you need to know as far as this topic is concerned. And now let's talk about another bill that is being tabled in the winter session of Parliament, and that is Higher Educational Regulatory Overhaul. So, well, government has been talking for quite some time that we have to reform our higher education system, okay? And for reforming higher education system, we have to replace various bodies that regulate higher education like UGC, AICT and many other bodies. We have to replace them with one body because these separate bodies fragment the higher education system, fragment it, make it difficult, all these things happen. Therefore, we need to unite the two. Unite all these bodies. And that is why an overall body is being created, Higher Education Commission of India, which has a different name in Hindi. So let's talk about this bill very quickly, okay? So Higher Education Regulatory Overhaul. So VBSA bill known as Vikasit Bharat Shiksha Adhishtan 2025 seeks to overhaul India's higher education regulatory framework by creating a single apex body, that is Vikasit Bharat Shiksha Adhishtan, replacing multiple regulators like UGC, AICT with one body. It is conceived because it was conceived during NEP 2020, New Education Policy 2020. It was said that we need one body. This reform under NEP policy or this provision under NEP policy is being implemented now through this law. Okay, so what key features are there? VBSA will be a 12-member apex commission with representatives from center, states, plus eminent academics and policy experts. Simple. So just remember, it's a 12-member body. It establishes multiple councils. So multiple councils would be under this VBSA. A council for regulation, a council for accreditation, a council for advising on funding of universities. Center gives funds to universities, right? So different councils under VBSA only. It applies to center and state universities, colleges, national institutions of national importance and eminence, technical and teacher education. Now, this law won't apply to nursing colleges, law colleges, pharmacology, veterinary sciences, medical colleges, and dentistry colleges. These have been exempted from this. Okay. So, yeah. Now, powers and penalties. What powers have been given to this new body? VBSA can frame regulations, set quality norms, approve, withdraw recognition, recommend schemes, all of that. And if any college or university refuses to accept this or they violate the provisions of VBSA, well, they can charge a penalty also, 10 to 30 lakh, 75 lakh, and many different forms of fines. Okay, so that all colleges and universities are compliant. Okay, now criticism. Teachers group point to absence of mandated teacher representation in the commission. There is no provision which mandates a particular number of seats in the commission. Teachers have been demanding that at least 4, 5, 6 seats in the commission should be reserved for them, but no such promise have been given by the government. So teachers are saying that they are basically very critical stakeholders in this higher education sector, and in this body their representation would be limited. So they are objecting to this. Okay, immunity clauses bar prosecution of commission officials for action done in good faith. This law says that any action done by the member of this commission in good faith cannot be questioned in any court of law, or prosecution cannot be done against that person. Okay, so this gives them some judicial immunity, which is wrong. So this is another criticism. Only these two criticisms are there, By the way, when this bill will be tabled and discussed, then opposition members would come up their own list of criticisms. Then we'll get to know about these criticisms in more detail. We'll discuss it again. Okay? All right. Now let's move on to third news item, very important, and that is India-Jordan relations. Now, Prime Minister Modi is on his West Asia tour, Middle East tour for 3 days, and the first stop is Jordan. Now, India-Jordan have historical relations, and their relations are multidimensional. We need to be aware of those dimensions. Plus, both these countries have signed various agreements, MOUs. So, in which areas do these countries cooperate? Plus, because Prime Minister is in Jordan, and you all know that UPSC has a tendency of asking map-based questions. And those map-based questions are somehow linked to current affairs. So any country, particular region of the world, when it is in news, well, there are chances that UPSC might ask location-based questions from that. So we will talk about Jordan's map also. Okay, so let's begin. So India-Jordan relations. So what was in the news? PM Modi has begun 3-nation tour, Jordan, Ethiopia, one in Africa and Oman, with Jordan as the first stop and his first full-fledged bilateral visit to the country amid turmoil going on in West Asia, Israel-Hamas. He's in Jordan for this date and will meet King Abdullah II, who has been active in Israel-Palestine peace process. Now, well, this relationship between India and Jordan has various dimensions. Now, let's take a look at these dimensions one by one. First of all, security dimension. Jordan, a moderate Islamic nation, projects itself as a bulwark against radicalization. It is against radical Islam, extremism and terrorism, and plays an active role in West Asia peace process. So India and Jordan are expected to coordinate on terrorism. The Bondi Beach terror attack in Australia that was committed by Islamic radicals, okay? Well, we are going to have discussions on that as well. So security dimension. Then economic and food security angle. And this is very important for you to remember. India is Jordan's 4th largest trade partner. So India is important for Jordan. Bilateral trade is $2.87 billion. India imports significant quantities of fertilizers, which are critical for India's food security. Okay, we import a lot of phosphate or phosphoric acid from Jordan. So this is important in that regard. Around 15 NRI-owned garment companies with about 500 million USD cumulative investment operate in Jordan's qualified industrial zones. So many Indian investment is lying there in Jordan. So we have economic partnership as well. And then the last dimension is defense, diaspora, diplomatic, which is given over here. Just take a quick look. It's very easy to understand, so no need for me to explain all of this. Okay. And now let's talk about Jordan's location, because location-based MCQs can be asked. So let's take a look at this map. Just remember, this is Jordan. Just remember the countries with which Jordan shares a land map. So it's Syria, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. That's it, these 4 countries. By the way, Jordan would have been landlocked, okay? Apart from this small coastline that Jordan shares. And this small coastline opens up into Gulf of Aqaba. And Gulf of Aqaba opens into Red Sea. So Jordan, because of this small coastline, has access to Red Sea ports. Okay, so otherwise Jordan would have been landlocked. So just remember this, that it shares coastline in Gulf of Aqaba. And these are the 4 countries with which it shares land border. Just remember this. Okay. And we shall quickly shift our focus to last news item, and that is India's narrowing trade deficit. Now, for so long we have been talking about pressure on rupee, depreciating pressure on rupee. And depreciating pressure on rupee is because of many reasons. One reason is India's very high trade deficit. Now, what is trade deficit? First of all, this trade that we are talking about is only trade in goods, not services, goods only. Now, what is trade deficit? If you are importing more goods than you are exporting, then you have a trade deficit. Unlike China, which exports more than it imports and runs a trade surplus. So India has always been running trade deficit and very high trade deficit. But recently, for the month of November, the government came out with some data, and that shows that India's trade deficit has narrowed. We are still running a deficit, but it has reduced. And that is partly because our exports have increased and imports have come down a little bit, not much, a little bit, but exports have increased, which have narrowed this gap. Okay. Now, what implications does this new development has on India's economy? Let's quickly talk about this. Okay. So, India's narrowing trade deficit. So, what was in the news? So, government data show India's merchandise trade deficit narrowed sharply in the month of November to a 5-month low. And this was because merchandise exports increased by 20%, whereas imports fell by 2%. Okay. Because of that, well, we have narrowed the gap. Now, the actual data is, well, total exports have been 74 billion, 80 billion. This data is not important. Just give it a brief reading. More important is from prelims as well as mains perspective, and that is what is significance of this reducing trade deficit. Okay. So first of all, it improves our balance of payment. And because of our balance of payment has improved, the depreciating pressure on rupee would come down. So it would support rupee stability. And now that the rupee has stabilized, okay, or will stabilize, well, it will give more room or more freedom to RBI to run its monetary policy and government to run its fiscal policy. Earlier, RBI and government were very hesitant in taking significant action because rupee was sliding continuously. This would stop. And now RBI would have more freedom and government would have more freedom to conduct various actions. Okay. However, deficit remains large. Yes, it has reduced, but it's still quite a lot. And it is because we import a lot of energy, that is petroleum and electronics. These are two thorns in our side. Okay, these energy imports and electronics. And we can solve for electronics if we improve domestic manufacturing in this. Okay, makes sense? Now, there is room for optimism. Strong export growth amid weak global demand. Global demand has reduced. Still, our exports increased by 20%. So, this is good news. One good news that you can extract out of this. Okay, but still, trade deficit is still high. It has narrowed, but it is still pretty much high. Okay, and that would be all. With that, we conclude today's session. So, thank you so much for watching, everyone. And I'm sure it has added value to your preparation. But it would add more value if you are number one, consistent and regular with the lecture series, and number two, well, you revise this lecture from the notes provided by us. So in the hope that you don't forget to do that, I shall conclude this lecture. I shall take your leave with the promise of seeing you again with another set of news items. Thank you, everyone.